You ever wonder, why are there so many art YouTubers now? It's something that I've been thinking about for a long time, ever since I started seeing so many new channels in my recommendations. And I only started noticing this about since the start of the year, so like January 2020. And it's so interesting, like following this new wave of people coming into the platform. First of all, it's better for everybody because there's more education, there's more content, and there's more culture all around. It's good because we can like find new people and new work. And then through these people, then we can find even more interesting people through their recommendations, comments, and their inspirations if they talk about that kind of stuff. We have more choices. Everyone has more choices with art content on YouTube. Most of the art content on YouTube right now, I would say, is mostly educational. First of all, because I think that's a really good like marketing thing. It's a really good search term. It's a really good way to like brand yourself as someone who like knows stuff and is also willing to share that stuff for free. But I think there's a lot more reasons as to why suddenly there's been an influx of new channels and new creators. With that comes, new ways of sharing art, which I think is really, really cool. So the short answer to why so many art YouTubers, I think, is because art education is changing in a very specific way. Here are my basic points that I wrote down. Firstly, it's because of supply and demand. Next, YouTube is a visual space, and it was always a visual space. Creativity is harder to automate because of the decline of art schools. It's a place of business opportunities. The role of what it means to be an artist today is really changing. And lastly, because of community. So those are my main points, but I wanted to just go into more depth about some of these ideas here, but also to get like feedback, because I'm also just equally as interested as to why suddenly there is an influx of new art channels on YouTube. Obviously the virus has something to do with it, but I feel like this started a few months before that even. So here I'm just going to elaborate on some of my ideas in a bit more detail. I'd love to know what you think. Firstly, on the notion of supply and demand, I believe that there was greater demand for more personalized, tailored art education. So I think about this demand for more personalized education as kind of the difference between, a la carte and a 5-course meal. Except you have to pay a lot of money for that 5-course meal. There are no refunds. So there's always an inherent risk with making an investment in institutional education. Not everyone wants to take that risk or has the money to take that risk, but because all of it is deconstructed on YouTube, you can kind of just like pick your path to your very own specific art practice and your art goals. Basically saying that it's free makes itself the point already. It's free art education and entertainment. That's important right now because TikTok, there's an incredible amount of traffic going onto TikTok. Also, what that's doing then, I think, is that it's increasing people's visual literacy in a sense and their sensitivity to like art. More importantly, visual art and the process of visual art. So there's obviously a lot of videos on TikTok of art being made and of artistic things being done, and those videos get a lot of likes for obvious reasons that not everyone is making art. I think once that seed's been planted in like kind of the general populace that art is becoming more mainstream and it's something that people are kind of actively seeking out after they've been introduced to like short form art video content of the 15-second or 1 minute kind, there will be a group of those people who want more. The next most obvious place to go for art content in the average person's mind might be a toss-up between Instagram and YouTube, but once you consider how kind of finicky Instagram's video is, basically Instagram's video experience is incredibly lacking next to YouTube, on mobile, on desktop, across the board. So anyone coming from TikTok seeking more long-form art education or entertainment content would probably go to YouTube for it. So that traffic definitely feeds into the demand there. Lastly, for supply and demand, I think that there's like a practitioner's land grab happening right now. The industry standard, if you say, of art for art YouTube is pretty low relative to the industry standard of the professional entertainment art industry, and realism, fine art included, obviously. Because of that, there are a lot of professionals who see like a huge opportunity in starting YouTube channels as a means to like accrue following and kind of reach out to their fan base, to find their audience. Because they're coming from like the old school professional world, their technical skill is obviously very high, and so of course they're going to stand out on YouTube. These people usually end up doing very well. And they also obviously have a decent following from their other social media outlets, like your Instagram's probably going to be doing fine. And maybe even LinkedIn and ArtStation, Pixiv and DeviantArt still. That all plays into like kind of the initial success of their channel, which plays into how it's read by the algorithm, which sees it as something good, and it's probably gonna like blow it up, send it off to people's right rail and recommendations. So these people are at a great advantage starting a YouTube channel right now, and I think that's awesome. And I think it's awesome that it works out for them, because what they end up doing is they end up sharing more of their knowledge, because that is a very simple thing to do, that an easy thing to do with an incredible amount of value and demand. Or I should say that that's always something that's going to be in demand. My second big idea is that YouTube is a visual space. The packaging of visual art for a visual media platform isn't so bad, if you know what I mean. Like, you're making something visual, how would you present that in video form? So the appeal, just like the mere fact that the appeal of your art was visual and it's now being moved over on visual platform, that means that there's some carryover in the selling of your content, in the appeal of your content as is, just because it's good, or just because it's something we need to look at to understand. YouTube is a discovery platform. People like finding new channels, and people like finding new content. There's a real sense of like satisfaction and like achievement when you come across a really good YouTube channel and you're among one of the first subs. And that's part of like the fun of just letting yourself fall down the rabbit hole. So especially for a smaller community, which I feel like is or was the art education YouTube space, that was like a real thrill, and it is still it's still even more thrilling to like go around and find new people who are finding new ways to share their art in video form. Sense of discovery is something that's universal for a lot of people on YouTube, and that definitely works in your favor if they happen into the art community. Also, YouTube is a search engine, and I think people like forget that sometimes, that it's right behind Google. I can definitely relate, like for things like how to change a tire, like why would you not go to YouTube first for that? Especially if you're looking for education for training in a visual art form. Where else would you go other than YouTube to start? You know what I mean? And also, when you look things up on Google now, like it's just the first 3 suggestions will be like a relevant video. And obviously it makes sense that you know, because they're the same company, but it also makes sense in the sense that sometimes the best answer to a question is a video. Creativity is harder to automate right now, especially in the economy. Like, people are very hesitant about certain jobs, and I know paralegal is one of them, and obviously like American trucking. So that's definitely something people are considering when it comes to like training for their career, or if they're finding themselves at risk of automation. You know, we have a tendency to like kind of compensate the other way, away from automation and into the thing that, you know, seemingly can't be automated, which is more creative work and artistic work. A lot of these people are going to try it and they're going to do it, but before they need to do that, they want to learn. You need to learn. On the topic of AI, I think we're seeing a lot of like weird, like uncanny AI tests for like making art and creative stuff. I think that's fine. I don't think it's that like developers are coming after artists or anything. It's because they kind of see that as being the ultimate test, in a sense, is that if you can create an artificial intelligence to like make something we consider artistic, you've established a certain limit. You've broken through a big preconceived limit in science. It's an achievement. So in like the machine learning world, art and creativity is seen as sort of a frontier, which goes back to the idea that that this makes sense is why people overcompensate or pivot the other way from automated jobs into more like creative work. Most of us agree that right now is the furthest thing from automation. So it took a while for me, admittedly, but most people living today understand that YouTube is also a learning platform and is often the first place they go when they want to learn a thing or know about a thing. Next, the decline of art school. So there's a greater demand for this a la carte style of learning art, and that's because the attitude towards art school right now is kind of changing. People are seeing it as a thing with an outdated pedagogy. They feel like there's a curriculum that's biased more towards training artists of like the modern or postmodern movement or something that used to be popular. So it's always kind of like one step behind these art trends in the actual market. So when students kind of get out there, they're a few years behind, not because the school did them dirty, but because the world moved ahead while they're in school, and the world moves ahead really fast. So in a sense, it's hard to say exactly who is responsible. It's kind of become like an accidental dropshipping course. You know, those classes that are like, hey, I made $15,000 in 6 hours selling shoes on Amazon. Like, you know, where clearly the business model is that this guy makes money off selling the class and not doing the thing he says he does. The school seems to profit more off of your money than you get to profit off of what they give you. When you're getting like less of what you paid for, you know, that of course you come out of there with less faith in this system of learning. It's hard for schools to compete with the quality, price, convenience, autonomy, and the subculture of YouTube tutorials. And it's not that every tutorial has all those things, but every tutorial will have some combination of those things. And the last thing that's hard to compete with as an art school is simply like commitment. Not everyone has like 5 spare years for school and $50,000. You know, if you're in $50K if you're in Canada, can spare like the 9 hours a day that they would be giving up for the next 5 years for school. So it's a hard sell in that regard. If it's an on-demand learning program that people can work through at their pace, that's a lot more approachable for most people who would definitely get turned away by art school or who don't have the money. Well, this gives them an opportunity to get their feet wet and to see how far they can go with no commitment. There are a lot of business opportunities for good artists. I shouldn't even say that. I don't think you need to be a good artist to be giving something of value into the world. There's a lot of what I consider like kind of bad artists who are making a lot of money because they're still, because simply put, they're giving their audience what they want, and that's totally enough. For creators, it's kind of like a win-win-win situation where the world gets free education and knowledge, and they get an audience on YouTube, but they're also getting this thing built up called their brand. And I want to speak specifically for YouTube on this idea because I feel like people invest way more into one YouTube sub than an Instagram follow or a Twitter follow or a TikTok follow. Because I feel like the emotional investment is higher, I think the emotional connection then will be higher too. So just me personally, I feel like the connection that people have on YouTube is way more engaging and personal than the other platforms. So next, the type of work to do YouTube is open and accessible. So it's really easy. Anyone can do it, you know, as long as they have time. So all you really need is like a phone and then just some time to hit record and upload, right? So like it's not as easy to make as an Instagram post or like a tweet, but it's still easy enough that it's within everyone's grasp. And obviously for creators on YouTube, the platform helps them find people who are, you know, genuinely interested in their very specific thing. This entire point that the artist's role is changing is summed up best by Seth Godin in his book Linchpin. Basically, artists now kind of need to be a specialized generalist in that you're doing one thing, but you also need to know how to do a bunch of other things, right? Like social media media and marketing and business and customer service now, if you want to go the independent route. His point is that now, especially now, more than ever, going the independent route is not only an opportunity, but is, for a lot of people, the financially responsible thing to do. YouTube is a big part of that in terms of marketing and finding your audience and giving back to a community. And YouTube is an incredible tool for a lot of those people, because this is true for all of YouTube, right? Is that the platform rewards you depending on how much more value you're consistently giving. It's a mutualistic relationship in that sense, where the more you give and the more you share, the more you get rewarded for it back. So it's great all around. And this obviously means that the artist is being more like entrepreneurial. So one of the most interesting things he said in his book about this idea is that suddenly artists, at people's fingertips, they have access to like factories of a kind. And artists, especially if you're a visual artist, you can make really high value products out of materials that cost nearly nothing, especially for visual art and visual forms. These are things that you can essentially have a factory for in your own house. You can do your business, you can do marketing off of your phone, you can do sales off your phone, you can do if your product is digital, all you need is a hard drive, you can ship stuff out and have a mailing room. That's just one example for how the role of the artist is kind of changing right now. Lastly, I want to talk about community. When people start channels, when people start being creative on YouTube, making stuff, in a sense, they're also looking for more people who are in line with their views, or for opinions, or for feedback. They're looking for people like them, basically. That's another reason why there are more art channels. I think art can be so specific sometimes, where you feel like you just might be going crazy in a corner somewhere, and you just need to come out into the sun and see if there's anyone else who wants to play with you. That's definitely a big part of it. There's an idea that we need to give back to the community. I remember when I was in art school, most of our learning came from YouTube. A lot of us were just going to class and just getting on YouTube to learn stuff that wasn't quite covered. There's usually stuff that was more like industry relevant that just the school wasn't covering, but also a lot of fundamentals too. Looking back, we should have been looking up fundamentals, but instead we're looking at techniques, tips, and tricks. I see it as flailing, as a move out of desperation to just get good really fast. So when you take and take for so many years from a platform, you kind of feel like, geez, wouldn't it be cool if I could give back somehow? I'm a big believer in the principle of the plus minus equal. I think Ken Shamrock came up with this, or he champions it. He's like a UFC fighter. You should always keep close someone who's ahead of you to challenge you, to teach you. You should have someone who is your equal to be your rival, for you to discuss and bounce ideas off of each other, and to be your learning partner. And you should have someone who's your minus, someone who's beneath you, someone that you can feel responsible for, someone that you can teach. These are the three things that you should have close to you in one form or another when it comes to. So there are more facets of the art education experience that are being democratized right now. I know there are people doing art school vlogs, so that I think that a lot of people who feel like they need some aspect of that student experience might be able to kind of test run it through these people's vlogs, and that's good, because that's more information that's out there for people to make a sound decision. A lot of people are uploading process work, or breakdowns, or commentaries, workflow tours, studio tours. I haven't quite seen an end yet to the amount of possible things that an artist share with the world that's not their art. It really seems like anything goes. This one's going back to my point with how there's more of an emotional investment with mid to long form video content. That's time and attention that you're giving to somebody, and that's time and attention that somebody knows you've given to them for too. And I think being on both sides, it feels really good to care. It's cool to see the people you grow and challenge themselves, put themselves out there and be vulnerable and succeed and fail. It's really cool being able to follow the journeys of people whose art you're interested in, or who've inspired you, or who, for whatever reason, you've given them, you felt a connection with. There was a point, and there were several points in my student career in trying to learn art where I honestly believed that I could do it alone. Having 7 years later, I can say that you can't. For me, I don't believe that you can do it alone. I think you need people. You need more opinions. You need more art friends. You need more variety of teachers and teaching styles and subject matter and approaches and philosophies. For the first time in a long time, the range of what artists had around them have just kind of opened up. The floodgates have opened in terms of inspiration and content and advice and education and everything. I really don't believe that anyone is doing it alone. I don't know. It's obviously really hard to sit at home sometimes, and I understand that especially now it's really hard to sit alone and to expect yourself to do art alone. But for a lot of people, that interaction or community feeling that they're getting from the YouTube, being in the YouTube art community, that could be enough. And I think it's definitely a great place to start if you do feel like you're artistically isolated. Guys, this was a really tough video because I'm doing it high. But at the end of the day, what I want to say is let's learn art together.